Hi, I'm still sick. I think I'm getting better. Uh, the the phlegm or whatever. I'm blowing my nose routinely, frequently, and it's becoming. I've noticed it's a little bit yellowish or a little bit beige tinge. So maybe that's helpful from what I've read on the internet. Anyway, forgive me for I'm not at my best self, but in some sense that's good because I can be able to get these thoughts out without taking a lot of time to create diagrams. I just drew the diagrams over here and create a whole sophisticated video. I want to talk about biblical structure, and a very key thing in biblical structure. I am concerned that as from my memory, I guess sometimes it's unfortunately, but I get this impression that sometimes I have this fear that, no, I have this concern that I'll be presenting it and it's above the heads of many people, or they don't want to bother paying attention to what I'm talking about, so they'll just comment on my hair or something or other. But okay, for those of you who are actually interested, actually paying attention, actually want to learn something important, understanding biblical structure better, here it is. There's an element called a chiasmus, and it's, as far as I can tell, it was in Greek literary. It's a Greek literary structure. It's a technique that that was put in Greek literature, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was also in Middle Eastern literature as well. It's something that I don't think people use a lot anymore. Okay, so it's called a chiasmus after the Greek letter chi, which would be X. Now, this is what I'm talking about. The upper diagram there. You can see the lines. I know in especially English translation Bibles, it's all in paragraph form, but that's what I mean by hidden structure. You may notice it's clearly part of the it's clearly the structure of the Tower of Babel story. You start off with a sentence. I labeled number one. I labeled, these are each sentences. Line one would be a sentence, and it's paired, that first line is paired with the final line, either thematically or in terms of the activity that's describing. And then line two up here is paired with the second from the final line, the penultimate line. And then line three is paired with the third line from the bottom. And then the X in the middle represents the switch. There's usually a thematic switch. I'm going to put this away. I'm going to put that away to talk about this in greater depth. You also see this in the flood, the Tower of Babel story, and I'm going to talk about the days of creation in chapter 1 of Genesis. It's a clear structure, and sometimes the writer can use this technique to imply or add new meaning in the way the sentences are constructed. For example, this structure encourages the reader to compare the lines with each other. And for example, it could start with, hypothetically, the Israelites came into Rampa and encamped by the sea, would be line one. And then line two, Moses climbed the mountain to meet with God. And then line three, Moses met with God, or Moses bowed to God or something. And then the X, the chi marker, is, as I said before, is the point where it twists. So the Chi line would be something like Moses saw God face to face, and God spoke with, and the two communed, or something like that. Then line the next line would be the one that was paired with line 3, not the Chi line, but the one just above it. Remember, line 3 said Moses prayed to God, or bowed to God. The next line after that Chi marker where there's a communion might be something like Moses again prayed to, or bowed, keep wanting to say prayed, bowed to God. And then the next line would relate to that earlier line in its place about Moses climbing the mountain. It might say that Moses descended the mountain. And then remember the line right before, at the top, right before the Israelites encamped by the sea. The very bottom line that's paired with that first line might be something like the Israelites left the sea and continued on, or something like that. So you see a clear structure. Now I'm going to explain I suppose I can go to the next diagram I have here. They're all related in terms of chiasmic structure. Yes, actually, that was my very next diagram, the one I was thinking of anyway. These are the 10 days of creation, the 7 days of creation. Now, I didn't put the Sabbath, which would be at the very bottom, but you can see the days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 would be at the bottom there, essentially between the two. Now, over here, as you can see, I put heavens for days 1 and 4, and then intermediary or middle for days 2 and 5, and then land for days 3 and 6. The first column, so you have columns and rows. The first column, the one that's 1, 2, and 3, are the involving the division. It's not so much creation, so much as it's a division from one to the it's a division of something to reveal something else. So in day 1 you have darkness, and then Elohim divides light from the darkness and calls it day. So in this first column, specifically, you have things being named specifically, and this doesn't occur in column 2. Column 1, you have divisions to reveal something new, and you have something named specifically, and you also have the creation of immovable objects, immovable creatures. So, and you also, I believe, have reigns, like ruling. These immovable creatures rule over something. So, oh no, sorry, that's the second. I think that's the second column. First column, day 1, you have light being divided from the darkness and called day. And then in day 2, you have the upper and lower waters dividing, and the upper waters are called heavens, and the lower waters are called sea. I think the seas. And then in day 3, you have the land, the water retreating or dividing to reveal the land. So then you move into the second column. The top, day 4, relates to day 1 in that these are the inhabitants coming into creation that will inhabit day 1. The creatures or beings created in day 1, or revealed in day 1. So in day 1, you had the light being divided from the darkness. So in day 4, you have the sun, yes, the sun being created to rule the day, and the stars and moon being created to rule the night. And then day 5, that directly relates to day 2. You have the upper waters dividing from the lower waters in day 2. So in day 5, you have the bird. It doesn't actually say birds. It says creatures of the, it says flying creatures, and it says something like creatures swarming in the waters. So there's and I say this specifically because anybody could write birds or fish, but it does not say birds or fish, as if the author is trying to make a point of saying, labeling creature, labeling them in terms of what animal they are isn't so important at this point. It's more important to identify these are the creatures inhabiting the upper waters, and namely birds, and these are the creatures inhabiting the lower waters, which would be the fish, presumably. But it says creatures roaming or swarming in the in the lower waters, and notice that birds are the specific. Now I say birds. No, I'm sorry. The creatures of the air are the ones. Sorry, my thing here is folding. Birds are I did it again. The creatures of the air are the ones acting as intermediary, basically, between day 4 and day 6, between the heavens and the land, because these creatures that have wings can fly up towards the heavens, and also trim down their wings and walk on land. So it's a special kind of creature that is an intermediary between the heavens and the land. I mean, living in an intermediary zone between the heavens and the land. And then on day 6, you have the vegetation being created. You have the animals that dwell on the land being created to dwell on that land that was revealed when the waters in day 3 divided. And then at the very bottom, day 7 is the Sabbath, or in Hebrew it's Shabbat, which means essentially cease from working. Specifically, it's been interpreted in Jewish terms to mean cease from creative work. So that's that diagram, and this is one of those fine examples of something easy that you can diagram, but it's lost by a lot of people who read the Bible, particularly in English, and they just don't care, or they're just mystified by little details. They don't see the forest for the trees, so to speak. And in some sense, you might be able to tell why I put this in with the concept of the chiasmus. Now I'm going to explain equidistant letter sequencing. Equidistant letter, meaning there are the same number of letters distance. You have 2 letters, and in between these 2 letters, you have the exact same number of letters. Specifically, you take one letter, you next count a certain number of letters, and then you identify the next letter, and then after that, you skip the same exact number of letters and then take the next letter, and then after that, you skip the same number of letters and take the next letter. There are ancient Greek code devices. So this isn't a difficult concept to understand, that the writers of the Torah, or the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, same thing. the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses, the Chumash, whatever you call it, the Torah. It's not something difficult to imagine that they would come up with. There would be a cylinder, and you would, in this Greek code writing technique, there would be a cylinder of a certain width, and you take your message written on like a ribbon or something, and you wind it around the cylinder, and if it's done correctly and it's the correct diameter, the cylinder being, then you would get the exact message. The website kaver.com, no, sorry, not kaver.com, the book that I have here, might as well mention this right now. This book mentions that in greater detail. It all links together, which is why I think this is a great illumination, enlightenment on the true structure of the Torah, the Chumash, the Pentateuch, whatever you want to call it. So, equidistant letter sequences. At the beginning, now you have to look at the actual Hebrew because, of course, the Bible was not written in English or Latin or whatever other language, Greek or whatever. It was written in Hebrew. And this is another one of those reasons why we can be certain, we can be absolutely certain the original language was Hebrew. You may know that the first word is Breshit, and I could do a whole video. Maybe I should do a whole video. They're like somebody, I read or heard that somebody, yeah, I both read and heard that there are lots and lots of possible meanings of that first word Breshit, depending on how you divide up the letters. I've seen it as something to do with 6 teeth. I've seen it as 6 things, something like that. Literally, in Breshit, B means in or within or when, and Resh refers to the head, and Resh, or beginnings of things, origins of things. Reshit, the eat part at the end indicates that it's like an adjective. It's in the beginning of something, or upon the beginning of something. It's not in the, like, it's not like there's a specific, it's not a noun, beginning, as, you know, the beginning is not a noun, it's the beginning of something. So it should actually, the translation should actually be Breshit. The Hebrew is actually Breshit bara Elohim et ha-shamayim ve'et ha'aretz. Breshit, when beginning of, or in the beginning of, and then bara means creating, and specifically there are 2 tenses in ancient Hebrew. There's one tense that means it's a completed action. This is similar to, I think this is the same exact concept as in Koine Greek. There's one tense that means it's a completed action. Then there's another tense that means it's an ongoing action. And bara is in the, I don't remember which tense it is. I have a cold and I haven't looked it up or whatever, forgive me for that, but it's in one of those tenses. Breshit, and also, of course, perhaps the tav at the end was also an easy way for the author to start his equidistant letter sequence pattern. But anyway, what I'm talking to you about now is how we can be certain that all 5 books were compiled at once. It was a written thing, a completed work like an encyclopedia set. It wasn't over a long period of time or changed various places or whatever. I'll explain soon how this demolishes the documentary hypothesis. It's one of the reasons that destroys the documentary hypothesis. That hypothesis is that there were, well, because there are two primary terms used, Yud He Vav He, which is translated normally into English as the Lord, and Elohim, which is usually translated into English as God, that there were two different authors, and then somebody suggested that, well, since there are two different authors, that somebody must have woven the two texts together to make the 5 books. And then there's a priestly, some of the Elohim texts referring to Elohim seem to be priestly or religious, so maybe there was a priestly author. That did not happen. I'm sure that did not happen. It was a concerted effort, one-time effort to create all 5 books. Now, getting back to this is why I'm certain of that. The Tav, the letter Tav, which is makes a T sound at the end of Breshit. You take that letter and then you count 49 letters after that, not including spaces. And remember, there's no punctuation. It's just a series. According to Jewish tradition, God dictated to Moses the whole Torah letter by letter. So it would have been like Bet, Resh, Aleph, Shin, whatever, and all letters in the sequence. So you take the Tav, the T sound, and then you count 49 letters. Then you take the next letter, which would be a Vav, and then you take you skip the next 49 letters, and that would be a Resh, and then you skip another 49 letters, and that's a Hey, and that's how you spell Torah. And that's there's been speculation. I've read that it refers to like an arrow or something projected through the air as if it's being passed down to a new generation, or being passed along, or sent on its way along. Torah generally, in Jewish circles, Torah generally means refers to instructions or accumulated knowledge, or the knowledge that we have, or tradition, or something like that. But it's also sometimes specifically used to refer to those 5 books, the Torah. In fact, the Jewish Bible, from Genesis to, well, the order is different. It's in 3 parts. It's the Torah, the 5 books, and then the middle part is the prophets. Well, the non-Hebrew speakers would know it as the prophets. In Hebrew, it's Nevi'im, which it's not prophets in terms of foretelling the future. It's Nevi'im, referring to those people that would, as I read in some cases, would go into a cave and then go into a trance and then receive knowledge from God, or a message, specifically a message from God. So whatever it is, it refers to somebody who is a messenger from God. And that's also the term that has been translated into Greek as agelos, and then that's where we get the term angel from. So an angel is not necessarily some divine being with wings. It's, in Hebrew terms, and probably in Greek terms, it's specifically a messenger. Agelos would be messenger. Okay, so going back to this equidistant letter sequencing, it spells out Torah. That's in the beginning of Genesis, the very first line, Breshit bara. That's line number 1 in Genesis. And then in the beginning of Exodus, the same spot in Exodus, you get that same equidistant letter sequence of 49 letters, and it spells out Torah. Then I'll skip Leviticus for the moment, and then in the next book, Numbers, you have the exact same thing at the beginning of Numbers, but it's spelled backwards at a 49-letter skip pattern. And then in Deuteronomy, you have in the beginning You have the exact same skip letter pattern. It's Torah spelled backwards, but it's at a 48 letter sequence. So let me show you here down there. I marked it out, and as you can see below that, I put 7 times 7, which would be 49. 7 is one of those mystical numbers in the Bible. 7. Oh, I should go back and mention that the 3 parts of the Tanakh. There's a Torah, there's Nevi'im, and there's Kotavim, which would be literally writings. It means writings. And the order is different because the Catholics basically rearranged the ordering of some of the books. But the final book is Chronicles. And at some point, like Samuel, some of the books were divided in half. I'm disregarding that. I'm just calling it not Chronicles 1, Chronicles 2. Just calling it Chronicles. That's the final book, and the final line is "Let him go up." That's the final line, which is nice. So I think it's referring to the Mashiach. I don't want to speculate about that, but I might as well mention that the Mashiach, the Hebrew concept of Mashiach, is very different from the Christian concept of Mashiach. The original Hebrew concept of Mashiach is somebody who comes in the line, from the line of David, is a direct descendant of David. David then begets Solomon, and the king of Israel, and then there's a line, and at some point the line, they're descendants, and then at some point the line stopped. But the Mashiach, Mashach is the verb in Hebrew for anoint, and there are several Mashachim or Mashiachs. Im is a plural male term ending. You stick im at the end of a male noun to create a plural form. So Mashiachim would mean messiahs. Anyone who is anointed with a specific office, like in the when the president puts his hand on the Bible. In some sense, if you consider that an anointing, that would be a Mashiach. The Hebrew way of doing it, the biblical way of doing it, would be pouring oil over the head. That's akin to somebody's probably going to nitpick about it, but crudely speaking, that's akin to the president putting his hand on the Bible. It's like an official act. It's like a bodily act that recognizes the moment or signifies the moment. Or blowing out the candles on a birthday cake, that it's an action that signifies the moment. So there's the pouring of oil over the head. So the priests would be messiahs. The king would be anointed as a king in a Messiah event. Anyone who has an office, particularly religious office, he would be a Messiah. So what we're talking about specifically, what people usually talk about, is the king of Israel, that Messiah. So it became the idea of a forthcoming Messiah became really prominent when Israel was under, within the empire, became, basically owned by several empires. I believe the Greeks were there. Alexander the Great came in and, if I have my facts straight, conquered these different areas, and they became part of the Greek Empire. And then after the Greeks, you had the Seleucidians, and the Romans factored in, well, at some very close together, within a span of a few centuries. So Israel was used to being owned by somebody else, like being a landlord and living like a decade or 2 decades under the yoke of being in an apartment with a landlord, and you want to finally be free and own your own place and so forth. So, and this is where Hanukkah comes in. That's it's a whole other discussion, but it was one of those efforts to break free from foreign rule. So during this period of foreign rule, the Jews, the Israelites, really wanted some king to come forth and lead them in some revolt and gain their freedom. It's something more akin to George Washington wanted somebody to, or some army, some sort of effort to break away from Britain. So it's something like if you labeled George Washington as, they were waiting for a George Washington type of figure to break from Britain and let them live their own land. What was particularly disturbing was Rome, from what I've read and the documentaries I've seen, Vespasian and Titus and Nero, possibly before that, but particularly Vespasian, insisted that all the territories that were owned by the Roman Empire can have their gods and worship their gods, but they must recognize the emperor, the Roman emperor, as divine. And that didn't sit well with the Jews, and they really protested it. And perhaps this is hyperbole, but earlier on, the story of Hanukkah involves I think it was the Seleucids, burning a pig or having a pig, which is considered ritually unclean. It's totally unclean. And that ties in with Jews being commanded in the Bible not to eat certain foods from certain animals because they are considered unclean. So this really, really got under was a really a thorn in the side of the Jews, and there was a revolt, and it was successful, and so after that there had to be a period of cleansing, ritual cleansing, so until the temple. Now that's where the pig was kept. Had to be the temple had to wait a certain length of time until it was considered pure, and then there was a dedication with lights, the candlelight, and that's Hanukkah. There was another revolt. Oh, the Maccabees, Judah, nicknamed the Hammer, led the Maccabees in the revolt. There was another one that wasn't so successful at, I believe the place was Masada, and this was during, I believe, Titus's reign, who came after Vespasian, and the Jews there decided to commit suicide, according to the historian Josephus. Now the reason we know this is that Josephus was then taken, basically turned traitor. Basically, as I understand it, just went to the Romans and became one of their historians and learned experts and scholars. So after that, he wrote a lot of histories and he wrote a lot of material, basically an historian, and he was then given the title of Flavius. Vespasian and Titus were the two emperors who began a Flavius line. I don't remember where Flavius came from. I think one of Vespasian's names was Flavius, something like that. I forget where Flavius comes from, but a little bit of Roman emperor history. You had a little bit further back. You had you had like a partnership, proconsul, I think. The Romans had, I think, two rulers ruling simultaneously. And then at some point, was it Julius Caesar? Julius Caesar comes in and knocks that away. He declares himself, I think he declares himself the prime, the first citizen, something like that. And then there's Augustus Caesar. So he declares himself emperor, and then that's where the tradition of equating Caesar with emperor comes in. I think Caesar means black pea, if I remember correctly. And you have this Caesarian dynasty, and it ends with Nero. And the Senate had become someone who recognizes the new emperor as divine. But that must, from what I've seen in the documentary Creating Messiah, or Creating Caesar, it was a Senate that recognized, officially recognized by vote probably, officially recognized the divinity of the emperor. So then Nero had a general, Vespasian, and Vespasian goes into Israel and does a campaign to enter Jerusalem. And I'll go into that another topic that I'm veering a little bit off from what I was talking about, but this is important. I would have done, well, anyway, it's a preview of what I'm going to talk about. So